Welcome to Three Devs and a Maybe, the podcast series for beginner web developers and general web enthusiasts. Now, introducing your show hosts, Michael Budd, Fraser Hart, Lewis Caines, and Ed Mann.
Evening all. Welcome to the Three Devs and a Maybe podcast. Apologies already for setting off to a rather negative foot there with my rather bad impression of whoever it was. Hope you're all very well. This is the Three Devs and a Maybe podcast. I am your host for this week, Lewis Caines, and I am joined by Edward Mann.
Hello.
And Michael Budd.
Hello.
I like doing that, like, hello. It's like that bringing them in, bringing the audience in.
I'm not sure it's going to have the effect that you think it might, but by all means.
And stop. Delete this out. I can't believe you wasted my bandwidth. 40 megabytes down the drain.
I've no longer done the worst part of the podcast so far, so thanks for that. How are you guys? Everything good?
Shall I go first?
You can go first.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, it helps if I pick someone. Michael Budd, tell me a bit about yourself. What's your name?
Okay,
where are you from? What have you been up to?
Married, male,
ASL.
live in Kent. Yeah,
it's a family
exactly.
show.
Yeah, sorry. Keep
long
it clean.
walks on the beach.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, no, I'm all good. Do I have anything exciting to tell you?
How's your week been?
I hope so, because we're recording a podcast.
I know. I was just trying to think of some exciting programming stuff I've done
How's
this
work
week.
going? What projects have you been working on at the moment?
So at the moment, I don't know if this is top secret or not really, but I guess it's okay.
You're in good company.
So we have our content management system, a very good content management system, if I may say so myself. And basically, we have an asset manager, and we've given it a bit of a facelift. It's kind of like a lot of stuff under the hood. We've stripped out a lot of stuff and kind of recoded a lot of that, refactored a lot of it. So getting quite happy with that. It's taken a little while.
When you say asset manager, do you mean within the CMS, or you employ someone who looks after all the? Sorry, that's. It was a joke, but it was such a bad joke that it wasn't obvious that it was a joke. I'm in a weird mood this evening. This could go wrong.
Yeah, just within the CMS, and the tricky bit of it has been getting that balance of using a bit of Ajax and keeping the whole thing running smooth. I mean, I know I've discussed this several times with you guys, but I do love Ajax and I love that whole user experience and stuff. But at the same time, I'm also very wary of like the junk that you build up because you're not really.
Have you explored like Angular and Backbone or?
No, not really. I did start to think about it, and I was getting a little bit worried about how big some of my scripts were getting actually. And I think I was getting to that point.
Callback hell, we all love it.
Yeah, exactly.
But then I remember you talking about promises, like using that, and that definitely helps kind of structure the code in a more readable
That's
fashion.
something new I've been looking at, and the reason I did that, well, amongst other things, was really kind of like, how do you manage that whole, okay, someone triggers an Ajax event, and then they start clicking away at other stuff. How do you control that flow, like, oh, well, just let it finish doing what it's doing before it goes off doing more stuff. And that's a real issue.
You kind of do want to kill the UI. You're just like, ignore the UI, and you have that, like, the white screen, like, kind of, where it all goes and, like, not responding in Windows. That's when it's
exactly.
It's when you
Do you work in raw Ajax, or are you mainly jQuery Ajax, like myself?
Always jQuery, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
I would not want to do it the other way. But
always use a library. There's no point in dealing with all the different,
I watched a couple of tutorials on raw Ajax, and I nearly ran a mile. I thought, Christ, good. Thank God for jQuery's way of doing this, because it's so brilliantly done. It's so easy to work with, isn't it? I think
just from readability point of view, it's so much better. Yeah, 100%. But I've been testing that, and just been testing with huge numbers. I've been testing with like over 3,000 images. Because I think that's a pretty good test.
That's a pretty good scale. Like the different resolutions as well. Big,
And I don't think many of our clients will have more than that. But it's scalability.
I like the fact you're talking about testing at the moment. It's a very good
testing.
It's a very good kind of direction.
Yeah. But on that subject, sorry, I won't hog the mic for much longer. But I don't really have any. I know we hate this word, hot picks. But one thing I was I was trying to catch up and listen to a few podcasts. Obviously, I listened to. Well, we'll talk about your.
Did you listen to any good ones in particular, or
no? There was
some guy trying to do a fake Scottish accent.
Yeah, that was really racist. To be honest,
it was. I was quite disappointed by him. I was like, how can I call him a friend? And he
I will come on to your podcast in a minute because your podcast
Devastated.
was awesome. And
It
Ed,
was.
yours was very listenable too as well. But yeah, just on the subject of Ajax, 'cause I don't know about you guys, but I just always return Jason. It's just so nice to deal with.
Well, that's an interesting little thing you were talking about because I remember you saying, so JSON, obviously XML is another big one. That's where Ajax came from, isn't it? Asynchronous JavaScript and XML, but obviously now we use JSON all the time, JavaScript object notation.
Yeah. Well, I did hear Douglas Crockford today. He was like saying,
"Oh, what
he
was
said
that a podcast?"
He said the
or?
J in Ajax stands for JSON. Which I thought was
really?
true, actually.
So, was that a podcast, or was it like because he does quite a few? Like, I remember listening to his he did like a Yahoo kind of series of like the history of programming or like the history. It's a really interesting thing of JavaScript and stuff. So was this like a podcast he was on, or did he his own podcast, or?
Exactly. It was on .NET Rocks, which you
very good
got
choice.
into. I love that podcast. I think those guys.
I still need to check this out. I haven't listened to it yet.
It's a really interesting because it's kind of obviously it's to do with .NET, the framework and stuff. And I've got a podcast recommendation this week as well. Actually, it's quite good timing. But to do with .NET as well. But you can take these away and use them in your own languages as well. I think it's kind of material that can kind of spread across all languages or
100%,
many languages.
100%, completely agree. It's the concepts, isn't it? Don't forget about the language, take the concepts. But yeah, he basically, the thing that really struck me was that he was saying that, because I'm not sure if he came up with JSON, but he certainly had, huge.
He's a big part of ECMAScript as well, like the standard and stuff like that. Building
Yeah.
He's a massive. Well, I mean, I don't know if you've read his book, Douglas Crockford, The Good Parts, the JavaScript, The Good Parts.
I know you've plugged it to me. Times,
any time you look at JavaScript, everyone will always. It's like God. It's like the Gang of Four, but it's like the design. It is like you should have read. You need to read this. It's a very good read.
Yeah. But he was basically saying when he came up with JSON, he got death threats from like all the huge, XML evangelists. They were
Geez.
you can't believe it, can you? That people would take it that seriously.
That's insane.
But yeah, anyone who's listening, check out that podcast. The .NET Rocks one with Douglas Crockford's really, really good listen, actually. And the next one I was going to plug was my good friend, Lewis Keynes.
Who's he?
Some guy.
He's Scottish, isn't he? Because I remember he did this Scottish accent.
I was going to plug myself, but I can see no need. Carry on, sir.
But he was a special host for David Connolly's podcast, and he kept it very quiet, kept it under the.
I did, yes.
And
it was sneaky because actually I contacted him during I think the podcast. I can hear Skype's going. I was thinking, that's me being annoying there.
I recorded that literally before we recorded with Phil Sturgeon last week. I literally signed off for that one and straight into the other one.
You're like Apple,
Wow.
They release a language just out of the blue, It's like, and this happens,
So how did it come about? I mean, what happened?
It was really weird. I was just at home one night on Skype, and I chat to David on Skype occasionally. He's a really nice bloke. He's an interesting bloke to chat to. He's always got bits and bobs going on, and I just sort of said hello, touched base with him and everything, and he asked me. Well, he said first of all that he's just flat out at the moment and is struggling to get his shows out once a week, and he's got a couple of people in the pipeline to record some stuff for him, and he wondered if I'd be interested in doing one. So, and I was like, well, okay, I don't know what I'm really going to talk about, but why not? Let's give it a go. So I said to him, what should I talk about? And he said, talk about whatever you want. I said, well, do you think maybe, my story into web development might be interesting? Well, coming from that into web development, it's not the typical route through the universities and stuff that people might expect. And I thought, there might be, well, particularly like my first job interviewing experience and the build up to all that, I thought it might, if it hasn't helped anyone, it hasn't. But I just thought, it might.
I really
thank you very much.
I know, and the way you're able to record it on your own, and I learned more. I've been friends with you, friend with you for almost 2 years now. Like we've been, close colleagues and then good friends.
I had an order of things written down, but it's trying to find that balance between having material in front of you to run through, but not make it sound like
I still
it's been
can't
too
believe
rehearsed.
you had a stag do the day pretty much. You literally left for your stag do the
Yeah.
day of the test. That to me is just like, wow.
That's experiencing the full spectrum of emotions in 24 hours, I can tell you that.
It's like 1 minute you're nervous and anything, and then the next minute you're completely and utterly
Yeah,
blinded.
when I got to Magaluf, that didn't last long. That disappeared quite quickly. But no, yeah, he just asked me, and he asked me on the, I don't know, maybe the Friday night or something like that, and had to make sure I kind of had the list of everything I wanted to talk about in front of me, and then just try and go with it. So I mean, yeah, it lasted 48 minutes, which is 45 minutes longer than I thought it would. So, well, I can't remember what the show's called. What did he call it? He called it Web Development Words of Wisdom. I don't know. I don't know if I'll go that far, but okay.
The only thing I wasn't sure about was the music at the beginning. That was crazy
yeah,
music.
I didn't quite understand.
That was not me. Yeah,
there was like a weird piano happening. I was like, we were in like a bar, you know. It's one of those like, hey, you're here to meet me. I'm here to meet you. Blind date. Oh, I can't believe they've done this. This is awkward.
Exactly. And then there was another. Oh, sorry, Luke. Go on.
No, I was going to say I've listened to loads of those shows, and I don't know. I've been following it for a good couple of years, so it was a pretty big deal for me to be asked to do that, and I was really chuffed that it seems to have gone pretty well. So,
it's great, great podcast.
Cool. Carry on.
It's another good podcast. Who was it? Oh yeah, Ed Mann.
He's a loser.
Yeah, flying solo. Well, not flying solo.
I had a special guest on. Yeah, Paul Bowden. It was a really awesome podcast. Like we've had some very good feedback on it, and
bigging yourself up there. I like it.
Mike, did he run it past you first that he was going to do this, or did he blank you just like he did me?
I had no idea.
I didn't even know this was happening. I thought we were a team. I thought we were in this together.
I was trying to pin him down to do it. You see.
Whoa.
I know that sounds very wrong, but trying to pin him, and I mean, because just having him on was great. We'd be able to talk about it.
Was. I honestly, I hate to compliment you ever, but it was a really good listen. I listened to yours and I listened to Lou's podcast, and I thought they were both. I actually genuinely really enjoyed listening to both.
Thought,
they were really
why
good.
do we need Mickey anymore? No, joking. Love you.
Most of the stuff you and Paul talks about is Paul, right?
Paul. No,
yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Oh, it goes over my head too.
It was over my head. But
I love talking
really
to him because he teaches me so much about this DevOps stuff and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And
that's not my area of expertise, but it was really interesting, and I'd like to learn more about it at some point. But
GNU Linux /X as well, because obviously this is confusing.
And it's nice that he's gone on Twitter to just slag off my website, which is
I'm surprised along with Joe, I think we are building like this thing. Well, you've changed it now, which is sad. But obviously, then he did find the Wayback Machine, which I'll put in the show notes. Don't worry, guys.
So
and you'll be able to. And I love the fact there is actually a Wayback Machine with your hacked website as well from a couple of years ago. Yeah, you could see it hacked. I'm like, and it was really weird. And I looked at their source, and their source was awful. And I was like.
Crossbones.
Yeah, and I was like, if you're a hacker, don't hack us, please. But if you're a hacker, at least do good source. I was like, this is ugly JavaScript.
The thing is, I wasn't really that annoyed because they could have done a lot more damage than what they did.
So what did they actually do then?
They just changed the index page. That was literally it. I don't know. I can't remember what it said, but
it said sorry, I can't, but you've been hacked by, and it came up with teletext type that, it was typing it out. It was quite interesting. Wayback Machine's awesome. I really recommend that for just looking at old websites as well, like Yahoo and Google back in the day.
If we're plugging podcasts, I have one to add, actually.
Yeah, no, please.
I tweeted about it. I listened to a couple of the Loosely Coupled ones. They're brilliant. Those guys are really cool, actually. I really recommend that one.
Awesome.
Quite like the old down-to-earth vibe on it. They're, they're not trying to talk people out of understanding what they're talking about. They're just talking normally.
Which is the aim of our podcast.
The Ed podcast that we've been talking about is basically the Free Devs and Maybe podcast, but it was like a special one that was released on Monday. Well, I was just going to say, I'm not going to say the dirty words of hot picks, but before we go on to our main topic, is there anything you guys have used this week that you wanted to plug quick? Well, not quick, you can take your time, whatever.
Lewis?
I don't think I have encompassed anything new this week. I've come across a couple of interesting things through work that I'll discuss in due course.
Awesome. I have got on the theme of podcasts, a podcast that I've started listening to. I love podcasts. There's a reason why we started a podcast was because we like podcasts. And it's called It's called codingblocks.net. Now, it is primarily a C# directed podcast. But they do, again, you can take this into the PHP world as well. You can expand it to other languages. And then the latest episode, Design Patterns, and it's the creational design patterns. And I was actually pegging an episode for us to do Design Patterns and talk about it. And pretty much they've done the best job I've seen online for it. So go in, I'll put it in the show notes for it. It was a really good episode, and they've got some really interesting stuff on C#, but in general stuff as well. So it's a really interesting listen. About an hour and 40 minutes, I think, of just creational design patterns and stuff.
So yeah, I watched that podcast after you recommended it, and also we were talking about this like before, but I was listening to the bit about the factory patterns and stuff, and
abstract factories and abstract factories.
Yeah,
yes, it can get quite confusing with the older.
But then they were talking about reflection, and we were saying, I said to you, I was a bit annoyed at the time, but like that's like a fairly new concept to me. It's only something that I came across like at uni, and like I started using it because basically I found it on Stack Overflow. And it solved the particular problem that I had.
So for the listeners, what is reflection?
Oh, why do you keep doing this to me? Basically, it's kind of okay. I'm trying to think of a good way of describing this. In my context, I'm trying to think what I was. Please dig me out of my hole.
Sorry, man. It's like runtime analysis, isn't it? You know, it's like saying, what have I got at the moment? Like you can do stuff like reflect on yourself. Like, what has this class got? Has it got these methods? And you can do some really powerful things. But as you say, like it can be used for evil. And
in my context, in a noob kind of state, really, I was kind of like I had this like coursework project where I had to like almost like a paint type program where you could have different shapes and all that kind of stuff and different actions. And I was trying to work out a way like, I want to move this left, but I want to move this square or this triangle. And I was using reflection to sort that problem out.
Reflection. Are you a fan of reflection? Would you say you know, because I remember when I did the masters for it, like there was one of the courseworks was heavily, use reflection. I kind of think of it not as a hack at all. It's a good tool for what you can use, but you can use it for, obviously. Thing is, you can use everything for evil, but it's kind of like pattern matching. Pattern matching. Pattern matching's like a thing that you get in Scala and stuff, and Haskell, sorry, and like being able to kind of do switches on different types, but without doing the whole reflecting kind of limits it. So I don't know. What's your opinion on reflection?
Well, basically, like, I had this coursework piece, and I got what I wanted to do. I got it working. And I was really chuffed myself, and I must admit I used something from like Stack Overflow. I was really happy.
Who doesn't? I think who doesn't look at Stack Overflow at least once a day for a problem they have? I think
exactly. But I remember
developers would go out of business if that shut down.
Yeah, you wouldn't get anything solved because it was gone.
But yeah, I was ended up mentioning Nick. Yeah, my good friend Nick. He's like pro Java programmer.
I think we need to get him on.
Nick McDowell. Yeah, I know we're in negotiation. I'm trying to get that sorted.
We'll get the contract sorted.
Yeah.
People are talking now. Are people talking to his people?
It's a bit unfair to get him to look at my code really, but he basically like, reflection. You want to avoid using that, and it kind of annoys me. Not he annoys me, but that whole concept annoys me because I hear so many people say, "Oh yeah, reflection is bad. Shouldn't do it." And then it's like,
hard.
But we use it.
Yeah, it's
and Swing uses it, right?
Well,
the Swing has to use it.
So, like in the world of Laravel, actually, it uses it because it's able to like do dependency injection. Like the idea that you're able to say like this controller needs these things, so it actually has to reflect on what interfaces you want, and then it will work out from that, from the IOC, that type of thing. So.
Yeah,
I don't think it's really, really bad. I just think you can use it for evil, obviously.
Well, that's my main gripe, though. Is it's like, well, okay, it's fair enough. Say something is bad, but then don't use it. You know what I mean?
Like, I think
it's like saying to me, "Oh, smoking is really bad," but I smoke 50 a day, but don't use it.
It's that do what I say, not what I do. Whole philosophy. Yeah. I do that. I find that in programming quite a bit. Actually, it's like don't dev on live, but then dev on live. It's like, well, that doesn't make actually sense. Then does it? You're not. Beating to your own drum. You're kind of lying.
But I think in the end, you actually gave me a better way of doing it, which was some sort of. Can you remember what it was? It was like a design pattern, but
I think it was a design. I think it was the strategy pattern.
Strategy pattern. Thank you. Yeah, and that was a much better, cleaner way of doing it. I have to admit. But yeah, it's just that whole thing. Like people say, "Oh, don't use it," and then they do use it, and it's like, well, it's confusing. That kind of thing. Like if you're a beginner programmer, it doesn't help you at all.
I think you're going to get. I think with all kinds of developer, getting in, you're going to get kind of the both ends of the spectrum, aren't you? You know, like one person says yeah, one person says no. You know, you should use this, you should use that, and I think as you come along as a developer, you kind of learn your own way. And I don't think any way is wrong or right. I think it's just the way you do it. You know, there's perfectly good arguments for both kind of way. You know, in a sense, and but that epic tangent again. But yes, so I recommend definitely that Coding Blocks.
Yeah, that was a good
I
podcast,
really
actually. Yeah, I enjoyed it.
And that's my hot picks done, really. I've only got one. It's a big one.
You said the words, hot picks.
Hot picks. It's going to happen, isn't it?
Oh, actually, I do. Well, I do have one, and I don't because I actually ended up not using it. But I did try it. I tried Track.io, Mike.
What do you think of it? Yeah, what do you think of it?
Well, apart from the fact that it was way more than I needed, I just needed like a simple task manager, so I'm just using Trello now.
Yeah.
But just thought it was a bit ugly.
It's really ugly. I completely agree. But what I did like about it was that, like
Apologies.
you say, it had
the
some
interface
extra...
was ugly, not the actual thing.
Yeah. The code is actually really good.
The designer should be shot. Poor person.
I think just something like that. You want it to look nice, and it could at least be like Twitter bootstrapified or something like that.
Yeah, I
the generic bit. Just chuck Bootstrap on it, and you're all golden.
That's my default.
We're developers. That's what we do. We're like, it's Bootstrap though. It's like, yeah, that's like five weeks ago now. It's like, oh,
you could get on board on that project. You could do all the styling for them and stuff. You know, because I'm pretty sure they're still looking for like contributors. So
that's cool.
Yeah, and it's
this is in no way criticising what they've made. It looks absolutely incredible. I'm imagining like for massive projects with a team of people on it, it's probably absolutely perfect. But for someone that just wants a simple to-do list, it's a bit of an overkill.
I agree, man. And Trello is so good, good.
So what for the listeners? Trello is that like I think it's like a whiteboard type. It's like a notepad, like a note table, like a board.
Well, yeah, it is like that. You have. I think they're called boards, as it happens, actually, and you just have a to-do, a doing, and a done
like notes
file
on it, like.
You just add a card and you just drag them from one thing to the other, and you
pin a to-do to a certain person and that kind of stuff.
Like, but everyone do the work. I want to chill.
Yeah. But as I was saying, actually, I think before we went on here, that the only bad thing about having one of those is that, well, in my case, that I've been adding to it all day. So I've been just adding stuff on my own to-do list, which, I'm kind of against the idea of that.
Why have I got this work? Who gave me this? It's like, actually, it was yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So my aim is to like tick off at least like 3 of those a day.
You know what, though? My main gripe, and I probably shouldn't say this, I'll probably get shot by my boss if I do say this, but Basecamp, I don't know if you guys have used it, but I think it is a big solution for many companies.
Isn't it?
I just think it's awful.
Isn't that the one so that's DHH, isn't it? The Ruby on Rails guy.
Is it?
Yeah, that's his kind of product.
Yeah.
So you've kind of so we won't get any Ruby people. I'm sorry, guys. I love you. No, I don't.
It's another one. It's another project management thing.
Yeah, it is, but it's a paid-for service, and I just don't rate it at all, to be honest with you.
Really? So I haven't actually used it in a commercial setting. It was more just me playing around with it, and I thought it was okay.
Well, you know what? Again, and I really do hate complimenting you, Ed, but like the system that you built for like a unnamed company we all used to work.
It was perfect, wasn't it?
It was really.
I would
really
use
good.
that now. I would definitely use that now.
I don't think I've used anything that's better.
I'm flattered.
Yeah, it was a good system.
And tell
quick text functionality.
Which popular PHP framework did you make said platform on?
I used Kohana. No, I used CodeIgniter. It was my first kind of commercial. Was that
hard for you to admit, or?
No, I don't mind.
Right
I have learned. I did it for my dissertation at university. CodeIgniter was a massive part of it, and I don't mind it at all. So finally, Lou, how's your week been, man?
My week's not been too bad, thank you very much. I've now launched my other freelance project that I was working on, so I've got a bit more freedom.
You're free.
Ish. Well, it was in a state that it could go live, which was nice, but there's still stuff that needs to be built on it and content that needs to be finished.
This was using your own framework as well.
This is using my Elkane's original framework that still doesn't have a name.
That's what I was going to say. Is the name still impending, or have you actually?
The name is still pending. Yeah, I genuinely can't think of anything. What I wanted to talk about with my week are a couple of issues that I've just come across, which I thought were a bit weird. One of them was, do you remember I spoke to you about the cookie thing that I noticed? Yeah. I don't know if this is for a specific reason. You'll probably know why it was happening, but basically we've got this whole session. Well, we got this session in init method when the framework gets launched, and it sets cookie params. If you define a cookie URL, it will set cookie params. I've disabled that locally because it's not really needed, is it? Or it might be needed. Do you need it locally? Do you think? Or
So what is this for?
to use session set cookie params locally, because it was just causing logouts and stuff when I was working locally.
So
I
we had
just
that problem
disabled it.
because we had that problem where it doesn't work with localhost. You have to have a 2-level domain or something funky like local.dev or something like that. It has to have a TLD kind of.
Yeah, but anyway, the problem that I've realised with it is when you define that cookie URL, if you like, for example, I've defined my base URL and the cookie URL underneath it. So quite often I'll just like copy and paste them like to be the same thing. But if you've got like the HTTP dash blah 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 in the cookie URL, then it never actually.
It doesn't like protocols. It doesn't like it. Cookies are very picky things. Like I remember actually I read the spec and it's like the most confusing thing. It's not as bad as email. Email is the worst spec to ever read. But yeah, as you're saying, the protocol, it doesn't like protocols. You just have to put like pretty much the domain, isn't it? It's just like,
it is literally just the www. Blah blah blah. Otherwise, I was just sat there for like pressing login, and then I thought, let's just see what session cookies are being generated, and nothing was. So yeah, that was why. That was what the problem ended up being. So I thought that was a weird one, but yeah, quite a lot of frustration.
It's one of those. It's a hit.
It's easily solved.
It's one of those. Yeah, well, that's the trouble, isn't it? Because always there's an easy solution. It's like, and I just need to change this one character.
Yeah. Another interesting problem I've got. This is probably about the 4th or 5th time I've talked about using set error handler.
Okay.
Yeah. Have you guys have used that? I assume at some point.
Yeah.
The only time I came across it was when we talked about it in our podcast. To be honest with you, I thought, wow, I should use that in the future. But yeah, please tell me more.
It's good, except that I use it obviously for the production environment. It keeps firing off emails of errors of things that are wrong, of things that aren't actually breaking the website at all. I know it's obviously erroring silently, but they're things that I just can't replicate. I can't actually make them happen.
So how what can you like give a kind of generic example or
just little subtle things like in one of my classes, like it keeps telling me I've got an undefined variable and stuff like that, but then I'll go onto the site and I'll use it and I'll test it all locally again and everything will work absolutely fine. And I just can't get it.
Is it a variable then that you have like declared and stuff like?
Everything looks fine. I cannot get it to fail when I'm testing it.
Isn't that the problem where the user has, it's like this and you can't replicate the bug? It's like, it's almost like our thing is just like, cannot replicate bug, go away. Until I can.
The problem is when you end up with like 500 emails and you just got this constant stream of emails coming in.
You have to filter them.
Yeah. But yeah, I can't, even testing them actually going on live and disabling like this error function, and just literally going like, just go for the old strict error debug. It's just not giving me these errors. So I don't know what's going on. It's really, really weird. Just this set error handler sending off the email to me is picking up.
Could it be
various
bits
and bobs?
Are you using are you mimicking environments or?
I thought that, but I've started to get them on my DigitalOcean server as well now.
Oh no! But have you got like the exact same like setup, like your local and live is?
DigitalOcean's pretty much the same. I think they're both PHP 5.5, but on the Media Temple one we use for work, no, it's only like 5.3 point something.
I think maybe try that, because that could be just a specific on a dot release or something.
Yeah, could be. It's odd and it's frustrating.
Yeah, definitely. That doesn't sound fun.
Yeah. So anyway, that's about everything I have to report for the moment.
So this week we're going to talk about testing. So Mickey, why do we care about testing?
Maybe you don't. Maybe that's your problem. I don't know.
I know, yeah. Just it works first time, surely. I mean, that's what the client thinks, it works first time.
You know what? I mean, I'm in data ground here, and obviously I should tell the listeners that I do unit testing all the time, and I am the perfect programmer, but I'm not. So, but in the certain situations, I do make sure I do it. And I've said to you openly before that I do it a lot more with Java than I do PHP. And I'll start off with that reason if I can, if that's all right.
Yeah, go for it, man.
Because obviously we do primarily talk about PHP in this podcast, and I do think PHP obviously is a little bit more of a setup process to get to that environment where you can test. Whereas things like Java, obviously you start off with JUnit, it's there at your fingertips right out the box. And I kind of had a little look on Wikipedia really to find out what languages do give you that out the box.
Well, that's interesting because, like, so Java, so it's actually part of the language, or it's more that it's a library that's heavily kind of enforced, isn't it? That I suppose it's more kind of the people that use it. You're going to use it for like mission critical stuff, banking. Yeah. It's like if I do get this rounding error wrong,
then
we got epic clusters. So
when you think you've got like programs that keep planes in the air, that's when it becomes
you want to care.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, putting up a website for your mate Dave is one thing, and then but other stuff that's take it a little bit further. Now you're building a shop for your Uncle Gary. Can you imagine doing something you've not tested?
Absolutely.
And he calls you up a week later and
he said, well, why is this not, you just realise, actually, yes, I didn't do this final part that actually got him paid. I completely agree. And that's what testing is about. But then testing, I suppose, I kind of, sorry, I completely cut you off there, but with testing, there's so many different, I mean, we test all the time, surely, because we do this REPL loop, we read, evaluate, print loop, when we're learning, we do that. It's like, oh, is this going to break it? And we like play around with languages and stuff. And I suppose when we get confident enough, we're like, oh, I know that's going to work, and we just push it live. But we're always going to test because we do test it. So, what is, I suppose, the testing we're talking about here? Is that manual testing, or is it more the idea that the computer tests it itself, and we kind of get away from having to do it manually every time? Could you imagine that every time?
Yeah, well, exactly, yeah. So this is where, you want automated testing, right? But I guess this is where I kind of differ from you and Fraser a little bit on your opinions, in the fact that you always talk about developers being pessimists, that we think this stuff's going to break. And actually, from what I've seen in my personal experience, is that sometimes developers are a little bit too cocky.
I think that's a funny thing, because I suppose that was a discussion we had a couple of weeks ago. My idea was designers are optimists, we can, do this, and then us developers come along and we're like, no, it's not going to happen, it's going to break. And as you say, I think you've seen another kind of side to the coin of it, where actually people are, developers actually can be quite cocky and quite arrogant in fact that it's going to work. Of course it's going to work. But then I'm like, my instant thing in my head comes in, how do you know it's going to work?
Well, that's it. And again, I mean, this topic is so broad and we could go off segue in all kinds of directions, but I guess a lot of it is to do with so the broader topic is quality analysis, right, of software, and testing is a part of that. But in terms of the testing and the QA, really, I think a lot of it comes down to the culture of the business or the agency. Yeah. And I've had it both ways. I've worked in a company where there's heavy accountability. I've worked in a company where there's a no blame culture. And honestly, I can say I don't like either of them. So that, I don't know how you please me, but it's a very hard balance to strike there.
I think that's a very good kind of diplomatic answer as well.
Yeah.
I think testing is, we do it. This is what I think. The one gripe I have with people is they're like, well, it's going to take me a lot of time to write tests. Well, but then you're testing all the time. And I think it's that kind of quick fix type thing where, it's easier for me just to manually test this.
Yeah.
Now it is, but then could you imagine the fact that you're going to manually test this every time it goes live? That kind of builds up. Why not write an automated test that may take you another, 5-10 minutes, and then you're able to just run it, seal green, and you're golden.
Sure. And this is where the misconceptions come in, and you're absolutely right. There's loads of them. It's going to cost me loads more money.
I think this podcast. I think actually the cool thing about this podcast, I think real world testing. It's fine that we can pretend that we live in a world where we can test mission critical stuff, where we, code, every line of code goes through 4 or 5 people and then it gets pushed, or it goes through 7, 10, and it, constantly. No, we live in a world with web design development, which is, the podcast is that, you could, if you wanted to, dev on live in a sense, and be kind of a bit renegade. And I think I kind of like with this podcast to kind of go for the fact that actually you will get so many benefits out of unit testing and testing in general.
Yeah, and there is certainly a reality factor. I mean, like, me and you both used to work for a guy who famously said to us that he used to work for a company where they said that every line of code cost £1,000, right? Because of the amount of testing they did. And that's very, very cool. And that's fine if you're BAE Systems or HSBC.
This is it. I mean, this is it. If you're mission critical, you've got the infrastructure to do that. But if you're, I suppose, you know what I'm going for? Freelance guy.
Yeah.
I'm a freelance guy and I'm working with WordPress or something. Now, in that kind of environment, it's a very hard thing to say, well, because where's the infrastructure in that? I think it then goes down to, in the PHP route, it becomes a time when you realize that we're not just dealing with CRUD systems, we're then dealing with domain logic or business logic that's specific to an application.
And I think PHP as well, obviously we've said so many times, it's kind of grown bigger than its original scope. And because of that now, and every business now wants a web front end. It's not like before when...
Well, they want SPAs. They literally just think they can replace... I mean, it's the whole things with... we did a podcast that's going to probably come out in a couple of weeks about C# and Java.
Yeah.
And their idea was web forms, and it was literally, let's just port the idea of how we develop applications for desktops to the web, and it doesn't work that way. They're two different dynamics, and that's great because then it allows different kind of things.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think all these misconceptions and all those excuses aside, that does testing actually take you so much more time? Time plus developer equals cost, I guess, and but it's trying to convince the head of an agency or a boss that actually you could add in testing. And it's not really going to add too much time on. And in fact, the benefits of that is that in 2 weeks' time, you're not going to have to be debugging so much because you've got those tests there, and hopefully you've got those automated tests. So if you have to do your regression testing, you can just fall back on that and it's hit a button, green light, boom, everything's working.
I think there's two different dynamics. Well, we come from the world of we want things to be right and we want to do this automated thing because it's cool and it's fun and it is the right way to do it. And then there's the business world of the instant hit. It's that kind of like, well, I'm paying, the hours work there. Where's the slot? How many more lines of code have you've produced for me?
Yeah.
Well, and something because I have had this in the past with clients. I actually said to them, I did say, I'm going to spend, I understand that I probably spend 20% of my time unit testing or testing in general.
Yeah.
And by that I mean I'm not actually going to test it myself like that, or I'm going to automate testing, I'm going to write tests and stuff. And I actually openly did say this on a freelance project. And they were like, well, surely it should be right the first time. And I kind of, and I can understand from a client perspective, you're buying a car.
Yeah.
Can you say say you're buying a car from Hyundai or Honda, it's like, it may break down. Well, hang on a minute. I thought you.
Yeah.
So, but it's a very different dynamic. It's
exactly. And you've just come on to one of the points of my notes, which is this difference of perspective of the motivation behind testing is twofold. You've got the producer perspective and you've got the consumer perspective. And using your analogy there, it's like, okay, well, you wouldn't go and buy a Hyundai, and I don't know, other brands are available. You wouldn't go and buy a car. And expect it to break on the way home. Obviously, I'm sure it does happen now and again. You get the odd lemon, but you wouldn't expect it to happen. It'd be quite rare, right?
And you'd like the confidence, the fact that I suppose it's almost the salesman in kind of the world. Like, it won't break down, and you'll believe them. Like us developers, that's when I always think we're kind of pessimistic, where we're like, well, it may break down. I'm sorry, but we're kind of realists. But
exactly.
Yeah.
So you're testing for the consumer there because you don't want that reaction. And from the producer perspective, you're pumping out those cars, and then suddenly you find yourself on Watchdog because 10,000 of your cars that were released from one factory don't have functioning handbrakes, and people have all died. It's like it's a two-way thing, and it's a mutual relationship, and you want to have. It's craftsmanship, isn't it? You want to have that good software and you want to have that reputation for producing good code. But it is that issue of that time and cost situation, and that's
it's the balance, isn't it? It's almost it is like it's kind of like a seesaw where trying to get it in the middle.
Yeah.
Like how much time do you spend? And the thing is I know like people who go down the TDD route.
Yeah.
And they're very, 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 very good at that.
Yes.
They're very,
passionate about it.
Yeah, and also they very good at they're very effective in that route.
Yeah.
But then you've got others, and I think that kind of gets with this, like with our audience and stuff. Like, so say, okay, well, I understand now testing is very useful. Not only automated, or not only manual testing, with me just checking the browser works. So I'm actually going to write some tests now. I'm going to take up some time, write some slog, sorts of code that will not see the light of day to the user. It won't implement a feature. It will cost them money. Probably it will cost you more money. That's what I'm fine with. I don't mind, as long as I know producing. So, you go down that route, and I suppose firstly it's like the limit of how much you test.
Yeah.
And how much abstraction you do and stuff like that. But also, I think with testing, it's one of those things where do you then give it off to another person? Like, because as you were talking before, you've got QA. You're like, do you then say, look, I'm the designer, I'm the developer. Like the designer, they're going to design it. Developer, they're going to develop it, and then you've got the quality assurance. You've got someone, they're going to test it. Now, I personally believe that it actually falls on the developer. Like, they're the guys that wrote it. They're the guys that should write some specs for it. But there is that kind of, you do have very good QA people and stuff. So I just want to talk about like QA and kind of where the boundaries are.
Firstly, they get paid a lot of money. I was looking on the web just before this podcast, so that's the main thing. But I think, in all seriousness, I think probably the main issue with that is we're not very good at taking a step back and thinking about...
Well, because we're so ingrained in what we're doing at that one time. And that's another thing. I think, what? The gripe I have, and I've done this to myself, is I know this problem at the moment, and it's fresh in my mind. No, it's not going to break. You come back to that in a month, right? And you tell me that you know exactly what's going on. It's the same with commenting. It's the same with everything. And tests are great documentation. Because you can go to tests and you can look at a unit test, a suite of tests, and be like, I actually know how this works now without even looking at documentation, because and also the edge cases, because obviously that's what you do in unit testing or testing, is the idea that you deal with like the edge cases, and you're like, that's what this is meant to do. I actually find in GitHub and stuff, I am drawn to code that has tests, and I actually will look at the tests before even I look at the documentation, just to see how like they reflect on each other, which is very sad, but
I think you're absolutely right. And I think the other thing is as well, though, but I mean, at the moment we're kind of concentrating on like all the issues that might come up and preventing them, but also like, and I mentioned this in one of the other podcasts, and again, my friend Nick McDowell, but he would argue as much about, testing, things go wrong. He would argue as much as that it's actually going to help you produce nicer code, because without going into integrated testing, if you're using unit testing in the way that he does and TDD, you want to keep your classes as loosely coupled as possible, right?
That's
because
a really,
otherwise
that's
testing
a really,
becomes
that's
a nightmare.
really good point. It almost structures the way you design stuff.
Exactly, and that's his argument, and I think it's a really good argument. And in fact, if it's been really publicised on the web, hasn't it? The whole Kent Beck Google Hangout, and he's not defending himself, but he kind of says, "Well, this is why I use TDD, because that's how I learn."
I don't know if we come from different kind of perspectives as well. I think we do. Like, I don't know if you're more kind of the idea that you write the test before.
Yeah.
You do write the code, and I come from the fact that actually I'm probably the opposite, where I will write the code and then write the test, but we end up in the same goal.
Yes.
But the thing is both ways. You're in the way the way with writing tests first is you're pretty much forced into thinking of how am I going to write this testable.
Yeah.
Now when we had Joe and stuff, writing, we're not dealing with the test problem. I think there's a balance with everything. I think it's always balanced where, you want to make something testable, but you don't want a mock of a mock of a mock of a mock. You don't want to have to, I'm having to abstract this. It's going to have to abstract this. We're going to make an interactive of this, even though it's, I think you have to deal with the problem. And I think web agencies find it hard to kind of grasp that route. And I think, because they think, it's a big company problem. Big companies should use that and automated testing and then CI and stuff, continuous integration and stuff. But we shouldn't, because we should just be pushing code. And I don't believe that, because I am very much the guy who would happily spend hours I would happily spend less of my time writing code and then writing tests to make sure my code worked, because I like seeing all green, and that may be just an addiction of me. I love the green. I love it, to seeing it.
Well, yeah, I completely agree. And I've never, ever, ever launched a e-commerce site and not thought, oh, you know what, for the first day, kind of like, I hope everything goes okay, and everything's okay. Nothing's going to go wrong.
It is legitimately, your heart is just, you're so scared. And it's because, you test it manually in a lot of cases. And I think that's where we're trying to, I think with this episode, I think the best thing is to kind of direct it at people who are kind of hesitant at, unit test, because you're going to get people who've got it's called the test bug.
Yeah.
Where they're like, oh, testings are great, and that's fine. We're, I think, trying to be real realist of it. Like, we understand that it can be hard and that it is a money cost and stuff,
and it's not exciting, is it?
Because it's not a feature. It ain't. It's not a feature request. It's not a new funky thing that you can do.
It's going to feel like you're delaying.
Yeah, and I suppose moving on. Like, so what type of testing is there that we can do?
That is a very good question.
I've got a couple that I can.
Yeah, if you want to go. Yeah.
So we've got unit testing, obviously, which is what we've been talking about, and the idea of that is really what in the name is that it's units of code. It's I'm going to test this one, and it's this singular, this one class, and how it works.
Yeah.
The idea there is that you'll use mocks to mock, say it's a user class or something.
Yeah.
Or mock everything else. And the idea there is to pinpoint that if there's a problem with these tests, or if there's with the system, I can then pinpoint that this is the problem with this test, because I know it's that class as well. You're then going to have your integration tests, and integration, this is where it gets, there's a lot of different naming conventions, and everyone has their own way.
Sure.
I go by the fact you've got unit testing. Integration is when, like the name says, you integrate, you then combine these, and this is as a developer, you combine these together. Maybe then you start playing with the database being, but you interact with each other, and at a very, again, it goes by the fact that you're able then to pinpoint still. It's all about pinpointing where the problem is. Because when it's easy, this is the thing, it's easy when a system's very small. The lines of code are small as anything, but when it becomes big, that's when it becomes a problem, and it slowly creeps up on you. And this is when I found personally in my freelance career, like, I've realized, wow, this is why people do it this way, because it's that small things, like at the day, at that hour, you're like, oh no, I don't need to unit test this because I know this, but you don't remember this, and you don't, so you've got integration testing and integration. Then you've got functional testing, and functional testing is when you're hitting, so in the web context, say in that kind of sense, you're hitting kind of a test database. You're kind of hitting the real thing almost abstractly, so you've got that kind of thing where your user, then you're hitting a fake database that has test information on and stuff. And then finally, and the functional testing in that case is, I then, as the developer, think, this is what you want. This is what I've given you. I've done my unit testing, so I know everything individually. Integration, I understand now everything works together, like individually components work together, maybe in like couples or maybe in truples and stuff. But then functional is like, I now know this works in my context, like that in my fake scenario of what I feel you have, this works. Then you get acceptance testing, and acceptance testing is when, as you were saying, Mickey, with QA and stuff, that's when the client comes along and says, this is what the actual client wanted. It's fine, we kind of perceive as well. And I think that's another thing, like you have like behavior-driven development, and test-driven development. Like, the idea, the main goal of all these is we want to produce something that firstly works and is right for the client. And acceptance testing is essentially, is this what the client wanted? When we were talking to them, even if it's just, a small agency, and we're sitting down saying, would you want this CRUD system working like this? Essentially all it is does it do what I want, they want it to do? Functional testing is the developer thinks it's okay. Acceptance testing is the actual customer thinks it's okay, or what we perceive the customer is wanting is okay.
I got this great line from, again, Wikipedia, the Bible of all things, which basically said software quality analysis encompasses the entire software development process, which includes processes such as requirements definition, software design, coding, source code control, code reviews, software configuration management, testing, release management, and product integration. And that just shows you really that testing is only one part of delivering quality products at the end of it. But it is a very big part of it. And probably a lot of those things people think, oh, I don't do any of those. Well, actually you probably do. You just never really refer to them as that. But most companies, even your small web agencies, will have a certain way of releasing something, pushing something live. They'll have a process. But it is a combination of all those things. And this whole, there's jobs out there, isn't it? Like software architects and whose roles are a little bit more abstract and taking a step back. And I think, like we say, testing is just a small part of it, but it is a very important part because ultimately that, like you say, it's that green light telling you that the code works. I do kind of think, well, I mean, you've seen it, I've seen it. How many times have you seen like a developer or even yourself like write code where you would have done it completely differently if time wasn't a factor and you weren't being pressed?
Oh, it's real world. I mean,
it's frustrating.
I kind of hate the real world excuse. I put real world as being. I love the idea with a company or a place where the real world does happen. You have deadlines.
Yeah.
You go back and you do fix them yourself because I don't know. I'm sure you do as well. I have some code that I'm like, during the week, I'm like, I want to refactor. I hate this. I know I've got to ship this, but I want to go back,
Yeah.
And you do, like even in your own time, just because it's like,
exactly.
I just need to fix this. I just don't like this. It's in my brain. It's kind of, and with testing and stuff, like it's just almost a level on that. It's like, it allows you to be analytical on, units of testing, units of code, like, and being like, okay, that, and even you'll get that with tests as well. You're like, oh, didn't test this as good as I wanted to and stuff. And so, but then obviously you do get into kind of the realm of, too much testing or over testing. Everything has to be abstracted out and stuff. But I think just bring it in, like just try and bring in at least a little bit.
I agree with you. And I mean, I think the thing is, like you say, like it's going to be a hard sell. We've said it so many times. It's going to be a hard sell to your boss.
I think that's the thing. I think we're directing this at probably mid to smaller web development agencies.
But what I would say is like, and I've had this. I've been pulled up when something I've done hasn't worked. It's horrible. That's the worst feeling in the world, right? Like you've screwed up.
And I think knowing in the back of your mind, you're like, we could have done unit testing and it would have been so much easier. And you're shooting yourself in the foot because, to be honest, I know you can blame a lot of people, but you need to keep. I know you just need to keep fighting the good fight of saying, look, let's just try it and let's do it. Because
absolutely. And if you're the guy who brings it into the company, think how good that's going to look for you. Like you're the guy.
Well, you're going to be the hated guy. You're going to be the hated guy. You're going to be like the guy, but you are going to, at least you'll feel better in yourself because, I have, personally, working in freelance projects and stuff and been able to kind of dictate what I want it to be. I've felt a very big bonus out of the fact that I can write, I can say, you know what, I can run these tests, and when I ship it, CI and stuff, when I run these tests and I run this suite that it takes about 5-10 minutes to run, but I don't have to do those manual tests. Think of all the manual tests that you're now testing, all that thing, and that's where we go into stuff like code coverage, where the hot points, what code you're actually hitting and stuff. If you can hit as much code as you can with your tests, you don't have to do that. And that is kind of the benefit I think you can tell to the company of we're testing all these hit points, we're hitting all these things without anyone doing it. And I hate that feeling. I hate that having to think like that, but you do have to think like that, unfortunately, as a kind of semi, like you do have to kind of look in the business eye of things because obviously the real world is that, but you can bring it in.
I mean, I think you just said before, like the amount of times you've refactored code in your own spare time, and I've had that where you thought, well, my boss is going to kill me if I spend a minute longer on this code, but I'm not happy with it. So you go home and you spend your own time doing it.
Well, you say to yourself, you're like,
it's frustrating.
Well, you say, you say to yourself, no, just ignore it. It's only a job, but it's not. It's when you're different because you don't.
Your code is your reputation at the end of the day.
Yeah, because they're gonna know. Like it's a very personal thing as well. I'm pretty sure that all three devs and a maybe we all could kind of look at each other's code and be like, oh, that's definitely loose. Like in a personal kind of sense. Oh, that's loose. That's the phrases. That's Mickey's. That's Edge. In a way, how we word things and how we kind of do things. So
absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree. So yeah, one thing I was going to ask you is, we also were talking about testing within the boundaries of the class itself. And when you get out of that, if you start doing things where you're relying on things from a database and you go into integrated testing, which is not ideal. But as a web developer, is that kind of unavoidable? Because let's face it, the majority of the work we do is CRUD work. I mean, if you're not doing CRUD
I'm going to
work,
be
why
like
don't you test
specific.
it?
I'm going to say, sorry, that's actually functional testing.
Oh, sorry.
But again,
Okay.
no, trust me, the names change
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah.
I go by two routes. In my personal experience, the way I've done it is I've had three ways of doing it. Either I mock it and I pretend like mocking for people is pretending to be something. So like you've got to say get query, get the users. I will literally give them like an array of users that means nothing, or I will go and get a test database, and it will be just the test stuff. Or for that, actually, create in-memory database. You can actually with SQL SQLite, you can actually create a in-memory database, so it doesn't actually exist. So yeah, so obviously we've now been talking this in quite high-level stuff, kind of like off with the fairies and what we actually do. So how would we bring this into the real world? Tell me a real world, we're using PHP. That's our language of choice. So what would we do there?
Sure. So obviously, again, in typical me style, it's kind of like do as I say, not as I actually do. And I don't use unit testing on a daily basis. For the bigger projects, I do. But what I actually wanted to do was like kind of take it back and see how quickly I could get set up with PHP unit. Just so it's we can give a fair reading to the listeners, really. So for anyone who's not used it, the first thing obviously to say would be the best way. I think we would both agree to do it, even though I'm a big Pair fan, would be to use Composer. And
it's the only way. Pair's dead. Well, they've actually discontinued, haven't they? Their Pair support.
I'm taking it over.
No. Well, yeah, PHP unit's best. It's still PHP unit. The X unit.
Yeah.
I mean, like you were saying, Mickey, with like J unit, N unit, R unit. All these. There's the Kent Beck, kind of brought it in with and Extreme Program and XP. Agile approach, which is always very kind of generic. Let's just say we're agile, but we can do anything we want. It's the same with we test, but it's like, well, how do you test? It's like, do you test manually? So you can kind of be both.
I think there is a little bit more of a setup process, but use Composer. I mean, if you go to the PHP Unit website, it will show you exactly what to do.
They have a great documentation for that now, and they're on 4.1, I think, at the moment. And
the website I just saw before the show is a lot better, actually, a lot better than it was. It was pretty horrible before, but we've got an episode on using Composer, right? Basically, the best way to use that, like I say, look at the PHP Unit site. It will show you exactly how to use it, and you should be able to get going within 10 minutes. And basically, you can set up a test class and just start off with something really simple. Just hard code something like just put an empty array and just you've got it on the documentation. You'll see all the different methods that you've got,
the assertions and stuff, and
the assertions, yeah.
And I think that's a cool thing because I've played around. Like Hamcrest is another one. Which Hamcrest is one that as Java is kind of like a DSL kind of thing to kind of simplify and make it look better.
Yeah,
and make it like more readable, and I recommend do that as well. But before, as you say, simply go in, load up in Composer, PHP Unit, and I think that's kind of what we're directing at. Look, go into PHP Unit, make the simple thing, and unit test it, and it's all about getting the edge cases because they're the one. And you must be like me and Mickey. The edge cases are the ones that get you. Or even the simple ones as well. Like they will get you. You will get bit by it in the real world. In RL, you'll get bit by this. Why not test for it?
Exactly.
And you think every time that you run this test suite, it's hitting it every time.
Yeah, and if nothing else, I know it sounds really selfish, but like at the end of the day, if something does go wrong and you've got the unit tests, you can go to your boss and say, well, look, I'm sorry, I did screw up, but I did all the right procedures and I've learned from this.
Absolutely.
And even to the client, you can say, well, I'm really sorry, Mr. Client. We did screw up. But look,
we did it the right way. And I think the right way. Yep. Completely agree. We rolled it out the right way. And it's not that just, we all manually test.
Yeah.
We all do. But I think it's adding automation into that is the key.
Yeah. It's one of those things that there's so many things in code that you have to do or else code won't work. Testing isn't one of them. It's left in your hands. If you want to do it, but you need to decide what kind of developer you want to be and what your reputation you want it to be. So, look, we can't force you to do it, but do it and at least try it because
and the funny thing is again, it will be something like, oh, this site is amazing. Surely it was unit tested. No, they hacked it together. It's again, like as Mickey was saying, and I'll plus one on this. It's how you want to be kind of looked at as a developer. Are you a developer that cares about maintainability? Because again, like you're writing tests for something that you've written, because then that helps other coders programmers or code monkeys, as we like to call them, Jason farmers, like be able to actually deal with it.
And I think the other thing I would say is that people I know who are really good testers, and especially, like I said, my friend who a big evangelist for TDD.
Who's this, by the way?
I'm not going to say his name. He gets a big head. Oh, Nick McDowell. But because he does it so much, he does it so quick, and that's the thing. It's like
it's reps, isn't it? It's reps.
Yeah, and I really do think that it's not going to add on too much to your time if you use it so sort of instinctively. So give it a go. And like I say, it has been a lot to cover. It's a huge topic, but hopefully that gives you a bit of knowledge and a bit of a head start. I think the website is just phpunit.de or something.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
Go on that, or just Google PHP Unit. I mean, packages,
yeah, exactly.
Get the package, just have a little play with that. I mean, there's other ones. There's Codeception, which is a acceptance testing one. There's Selenium, which is again functional, more acceptance testing one, where you're checking, actually in the browser, which is the same as Codeception, really. You can get very complex, and I'm sure in future podcasts we will. But I think for the I think for this podcast, the great thing, the thing I want to kind of really say is give it a go. Like, I know so many people that don't do tests, don't do that way of thinking or that kind of mindset, and it will open you up and it will give you better designs. It will make you design the system better, more modular. Actually, they'll be loosely coupled. You will start building systems, and I've done myself, is more loosely coupled systems, because you'll be thinking, so how am I going to test this? And obviously there's the balance, and there's also your personal preferences and stuff, and that's fine, but really give automated testing a go. Please do, because I'm well behind. I am so behind, obviously, the testing kind of philosophy and stuff. But I understand that it's fine for people kind of to be kind of religious on this front, in a sense. But then this is the real world, and I can tell you from the real world, it's a good thing as well. Yeah.
And before we go, one thing Lou did mention to us, because we completely forgot, was to wish our good pal and co-host Fraser Hart.
Absolutely.
Hell
yes. Best of luck, sir. He has now jet-setted off this morning, actually. He tweeted us saying, he's off, and he's actually going on his row. It's just like a couple of miles, isn't it? It's just, it's not nothing big. It's just like...
Yeah, I think the boat has an engine. I think there's secret in it.
How he's doing it. So he's been in America, in California at the moment, and then he's actually now rowing to Hawaii.
It's amazing.
Which, the more I think of it, the more insane I think he is. Bless him. All the best for all four of them, and Pacific Rowers. I think it's pacificrowers.com or .org. We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
Please sponsor them, and great work.
We are missing him on the show, definitely.
Absolutely.
Great to have him back.
His sweet tones. Well, guys, it's been awesome having you on. By on, I mean, like, Lou came and goes. Like, unfortunately, he had things to do, unfortunately. But, he came on at the beginning, which was awesome. And, Mickey, it's been great talking to you.
And you, man. It's been awesome.
Have a good evening. Hope England do well on Thursday. Or tomorrow, that is, actually.
I'm off to watch Spain and Chile. Well, not actually off to Brazil to watch it, but just...
You were legitimately off, It's like, goodbye.
Jetting off. My private jet. Yeah.
Are you going to test it, though? You're making sure to test it?
Hopefully someone did.
It's like, I'm not getting on this plane unless I see a suite of tests that I can run
if you
through.
Did the program,
I'm walking if I wrote the program, it would just be garbage.
Red lights.
Yeah, red light. It would just be like beep beep beep. Oh dear. Anyway, listeners,
thanks for listening,
great.
Guys.
Thanks for listening, bearing with us this episode, and goodbye.
Bye.
And good night. Not goodbye. That sounds really good. Goodbye. Good night.
Bye.
You've been listening to 3 Devs and a Maybe. You can contact us at contact@3devsandamaybe.com or follow us on Twitter at 3 Devs and a Maybe.